it's hard, especially when everybody's sort of in the same space, if you will, of grieving and mourning in very different ways. Sometimes we're overlooking that other person's grief.
Sure.
I guess on that note, what are some signs of grief? How can we recognize that?
One of them, and we're seeing it a little bit. Some of us are calling it politics or whatever, but some of it's just fear and anger that's coming out from people, and they're really grieving what they used to have and they want it back, but it's coming out as anger against the government, anger against the system, or fear of the unknown. So I would say fear and anger are a part of some symptoms that you might see in someone who's grieving.
Wow.
And that happens in death too. You see people get upset and angry or fearful. So
Yeah. Wow. Jen, Charles, any other signs of grief?
Well, it's easy enough to say. I mean, I think you've seen through this whole process the Kübler-Ross stages of grief. I mean, you see it on the news, you see people that are in denial that this isn't happening. I mean, that is a stage of grief. People don't want to admit that this is as bad as it is. I think that's probably the reason why, what you brought up with the ministers about that we're not engaging in this the way we did with September 11th. There's 60,000 people died. There wasn't even 3,000 people died with September 11th. We got 60,000 people died, and it's not getting the recognition because people are in denial, which I get frustrated. I walk in the place and I see people not wearing masks. I'm not going to get it. This is all a hoax. This is overblown, blah, blah, blah. And then you get the people like me that are angry that people are acting like that. So that's a stage of grief. There's days I've been depressed because I haven't seen my children. And I'm not even talking about the loss of life here. I'm just talking about the change in our new normal or whatever it is going to be. I haven't gotten to either bargaining or acceptance yet, so I'm still in the first three.
I think the signs of grief, everybody can and does grieve very differently. And I think that different situations will essentially make you grieve differently as well. I mean, I have been unfortunately a part of a few different scenarios of loss, and all of them have, I've shown the signs of grieving very differently depending on what was needed or what I believe was needed from me at the time being, whether that was to be stronger for somebody else, whether that was me, holding back because I felt others needed to grieve more or should be grieving more. So I think the signs of grief are very internal, as Karen said. But I think I've always kind of just associated grief with a feeling of being overwhelmed with something. And that's why I think it's similar to just loss of anything.
right.
And feel overwhelmed with something that's not necessarily a death. It could be change. It could be loss of a job or loss of your home, your relationship. Certainly did grieve. We still grieve. Yes, it was possible, but I think there were also different emotions that came up, maybe emotions of, maybe some of the anger that Teresa had mentioned in just having a joyous time of my life be very connected with such a terrible time too. And confusion of, should I be happy in this moment? Should I not? Who should I call when I'm going into labor? Who shouldn't I? So I think I did grieve, but I did grieve differently. And it was a very confusing time.
Yeah. It's always complicated when there are joyous things combined, overlapping with very tragic things or sad things, or or somebody's pregnant and the other person just lost their job and they're best friends and they're having a hard time combining those emotions. And so I think just recognizing that that's okay and honoring the joy and the loss at the same time, and knowing that each person has to do what they need to do for themselves.
I don't know. It's,
Wow.
we're all going through it, and then factor on, you know, the losses that we've had on top of it. You know, it's just, this is a whole new, and I don't think that the world is going to be the same. It wasn't the same after September 11th. It's not going to be the same after this. It wasn't the same after the Great Depression. So an event like this can never, our lives will never go back to, and I think people think that's still going to happen, and that's the denial state.
That's the denial.